Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Faitheism Project podcast. My name is Alan Katz. I have always been grateful to Hebrew School for making me the atheist I am today.
And my name is Randy Lovejoy, and I specialize in helping people that are working outside of the church to go inside of the faith. And it is great to be with you, Alan, today.
I am on the road today.
On the road
I wish
again.
Yes, I am on the road again. Just can't wait to get back on the road again. My friends just can't wait to get on the road again. I'm back east visiting family. The sound on this end may be a little louder than usual because there are circumstances so far beyond my control. So I'll apologize, dear audience. A bunch of podcasts back at the start of this season, Randy and I had our sons, Lukas and Tristan, as guests, and we had a good one. A very animated, multifaceted four-way conversation that went all kinds of fascinating directions. We'll link to it here on the pages, but I also recommend if you're just listening to the podcast, check that one out. It's I think we called it Gen-Z calling. I think that's what we called it.
Yeah,
well worth your time. What you young people have to say is quite fascinating. Lukas joined us.
And what old people have to say is fascinating too. I don't want to leave us out, but
Well, I take for granted. Lukas joined us a little while ago for a very interesting conversation, and Tristan has been harboring some questions that he has had for Randy for quite some time. I'll before we bring Tristan in, I'll give you a little background to the audience. While Tristan and Lucas were in high school before they went off to college, Randy at his church, the Silver Lake Community Church, he had a community group for young people. And it was once every couple of weeks, they would get together for a conversation. There was a pantry, a food pantry at the church, and so they would participate in that. And Randy had some speakers come talk to the group. There were some homeless people who live at the LA River, which is nearby, but also some of them were living outside the church, and that really opened, I think, the group's eyes to who homeless people were and who they weren't. Yeah. And really, it opened their eyes to the humanity of people that we tend to look right past. Yeah. Anyway, as I was a big fan of what Randy did in that group.
Yeah, it was great.
For Tristan, that was really good. And all of our kids. It was time well spent. So as a way of explanation, the relationship that Randy and Tristan have started eons ago. So that Tristan has questions for Randy isn't sudden and incidental. It really is. It's part of a long-term relationship that they have as Randy is a community leader and Tristan is a young person in the community.
Yeah. Yep. That's right.
With that said, we're going to bring Tristan into the room, and I'm just going to sit back here and just watch what happens.
Yeah, I'm excited. I can't wait.
As we're shifting technologies here and there, Randy's going to walk across the room while he's metaphorically letting Tristan into the room. The odd thing is that he has to walk across the room to push the button to electronically, let Tristan into the room. Oh, we only ever think we have the technology. The technology always has us. Ain't that the truth? Tristan, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing well. How are y'all?
Tristan, of course, is back in Los Angeles, as is Randy, while I'm here on the East Coast, and there is Randy. So Tristan, I mentioned the fact that Randy had, while you were in high school, he had that group that he ran out of his church where you guys had discussions and dinner and guest speakers, and you also did some community work. that's kind of where your relationship with Randy kind of started. So that the questions that you have for him, I was pointing out, in a sense, they all started back then years ago. These things have been, would we say, brewing or festering?
I said brewing.
Okay, brewing. Whoa, that's a relief.
Yeah, that's better. That's better because the end result is, something you can enjoy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, so go for it. I mean, I've been excited when I heard that you had some questions, and yeah, just love looking forward to the conversation. So
yeah, my hope for these questions is I like to think of them as maybe some unfolding questions, in the sense that hopefully they lead to, it's like question, answer, another question, or so we'll kind of see. But yeah, I'll just kind of start it right out, kind of a basic one. Do you see there being levels to faith? I can like extrapolate more. Levels to faith.
Okay.
You see there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, give me a little bit more about that, because I want to answer it the right way.
Okay.
20 directions.
So the way I was kind of thinking about it was in the framework that you gave when me and Lucas were on, was we go from innocence to wisdom, in the sense, and then the question was, what's better? Is like, heaven or but in that kind of framework understanding, and that isn't, you don't have to abide by that framework, but that was the one I was kind of picking up on, is that we go from not needing faith because that could also be a topic for discussion, because we're in this place where we don't necessarily need faith, to now fallen and we do need faith. And the question is there like a base level, like can one have more faith once one already has faith? Like, you go from not knowing to having faith, then is there like a level then of having more faith as you grow older? Does wisdom, like one can get more wise? Can one get more faithier?
Yeah, I think, the first part of it to me is like, how would you define faith? Because I think that's like a key part of this, is what is faith?
Defining terms, very good. Yes, absolutely. Define your terms.
Yeah. So, I mean, how would you see it? And I can tell you how I see it, but what
okay. I see faith as something that you, that's a great, let's turn the question right back on me.
I learned that from this Jewish guy that I read a lot of his stuff, and i.e. Jesus, he tended to do that to people. He'd like turn it around, and then I'm like, oh, that's like a Jewish way of doing it. Okay, all right, I get it. No, but seriously, if just to clarify terms, or I can tell you what I think of it as if you want. I mean, whatever's.
And answering questions with questions is a cultural.
I said it was. I just didn't know the question. Yeah. Okay. Faith is, I would define faith as something, I can't say this is gonna be the greatest explanation, or just, it's like, I just want to give a usable term. Just
working definition. Yeah.
Something that it's a belief, that's not really great. It is an orientation towards, it's an orientation towards the world. As far as what you believe and what signals and signifiers matter, right? So an example would be, one who's faithful, a sign could be much different than a sign to someone who's like a scientist, or like someone who practices science. So like, you could be like, see like like a thing and interpret it as like a sign from God, as like a testament to your faith. Whereas if you're kind of more endowed, or not endowed, if you're more kind of leaning towards like thinking scientifically, you would see like, oh, but is there a pattern or something, like,
Yeah. I mean, so it sounds like, tell me if I'm right, but part of your thinking, in a way, it's kind of like a paradigm through which you kind of interpret and find, meaning and all of that. So like, if your main faith or main paradigm is more on the scientific side, then that's where you're going to go for answers to different situations and questions. But if it's more on the, say, religious side, then is that right, or is that not?
You know what? That is right. Yeah, it took me a second. That is right. My dad won't agree with that, but that is right. I think that's right. Yeah.
And I think I'd start a lot more basic in terms of my sense of what faith is. It would eventually get to a paradigm of some kind, but I'd start with just trust. I think of faith as trust.
Trust in what though?
Yeah, in something other than yourself, which I think that gives you an orientation. Like if it, well, I guess I could say I trust myself, but in a way that's kind of an odd feedback loop, rationally in a way. But to trust someone else, that requires a relationship and building, kind of relying on someone else and then that moves into, so like I would say, even with there are different thinkers that we trust and other ones we don't trust. So to me, that it's like there's certain thinkers that I trust them a lot, so I'd say I have faith that their approach is a good one. There are others that it's like, no, I don't trust them, so I don't have faith in them.
Can we go more nuts and bolts for a second?
Sure.
Way back when you and I started this podcast, one of the first topics we discussed was certainty versus uncertainty.
Yes.
And in essence, people of faith need to know with certainty that there's a beginning, there's an end, there's a purpose, there's a reason, and there's a man behind the curtain. There's an absolute need to know. Whereas people who are willing to accept the scientific method as the basis for their faith, they're willing to, hey, if science tells us tomorrow that everything you thought today is untrue, the new evidence says otherwise, you have to be willing to go there. That's the article of faith.
But one still has faith in the scientific method and the whole structure of you have faith. Like science isn't objective, and for objective's sake, this is another thing we disagree upon is like.
But science will do one thing that faith will not. And science will, when it comes to a point where science does not have the data,
it will say it does not have the answers.
It will say we don't know.
We don't know.
And that's the dividing line between
one thing
faith and
I think it's important to note though that I think faith is true. You can have faith in people, Randy, but I'd say is there not something different to having faith in God or something like a figure there is a relationship, but it's not a relationship of back and forth, or maybe there is, and that's a part on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, and I mean, there's a way, we can talk about this in terms of theology, and we can talk about this in terms of reality with different people, because there's a theological approach, but and some people have gone further down that road than others. So in other words, you'll find people that call themselves Christians, but their Christianity is based upon a more legal institutional approach to things. So everything is judged by a set of propositional truth statements that they believe are true. And if you fit within their framework, then you're okay. If you don't fit within their framework, you're not okay. But I think there are other people that really understand the heart of faith and the Christian faith. And this is in distinction to, say, some of the other world religions, some of the other ones, but it's a personal relationship. What that means is that there is some people would kind of say, well, what's that thing about, like, people on kind of the popular thing about karma, which isn't really accurate, but it's popular, is kind of like if you throw good energy out there, it'll come back to you, right? But what Christianity says is it's not just energy that's out there. There's actually personality that's a part of that as well. And so there is an interaction that takes place. And that's why I use trust for faith, is because to me, I'm not trusting in a set of propositional truth statements, although there are some that would support what I'm trusting, but I'm trusting a interactive personal being that I think is very interactive, very much a part of what's going on in the world. Whereas like deists, like some of the founding fathers were deists, and their approach was that kind of created things and then took off. Mine would be that God's much more involved in everyday life even now. So the faith is it's very much a interactive thing. It's different to my relationship with my wife in all sorts of ways. It's a different kind of relationship, but it is a relationship that has personality, and that's where my understanding, at least, of some of the Buddhist approach and are more, there isn't really a personality out there. And that's why some people would say that Buddhism in its purest form is actually atheistic, because it doesn't believe in a God. It believes in a force, power, and you kind of lose yourself into that. But Christianity is very much about personality, personhood, interacting with the person of God. So I don't know if that's taking you where, but to me, that's a key part of what makes Christianity. And so for me, for my faith, that's a key part of my faith, is there is an interactive and trusting kind of
with a singular being, though.
Yeah, although people like Muslims, some Muslims and others will get on Christians and say that we're not monotheistic, that we have three gods, because we talk about the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. But that's one of the things that Christians have struggled to explain as best as they can through
Here's
history.
why we're not polytheists. We swear.
Well, but here,
That's right.
I guess my thing, something I've kind of thought a lot recently, it's just the way that, like, and it's something I've heard, is the way that monotheism is very it's very historically small in comparison with polytheism.
Yeah, although I do think there's some studies that show that the shift from polytheism to monotheism, even like with in Egyptian culture, I think that it made a radical difference in terms of civilization and organization and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think it's more common. But and I think I would say that Christianity is monotheistic. I would say that we haven't explained how, but that's where I think the way Alan set up
still a young
science
faith.
versus
Give it
faith.
time.
Well, the thing to me is that's something we don't have certainty in terms of the data of it. In terms of pinpointing it. But what we do have is all sorts of data, experiential and biblical and otherwise, the different authoritative texts that lead us to believe in the thing called the Trinity. It's just nobody's explained it in a way that just nails everything. But that's the thing, is there is a lot of mystery in Christianity. I know, the way some people try to portray it, especially in the modern period, is that it's this thing that everything's mapped out, everything's explained, it all makes sense. And mystery has been a huge part of Christianity and Judaism ever since its beginning. And it's something I really value about my faith is there's a lot of mystery and a lot of things that aren't explained. So
were you saying it would be a good thing if there was a data set to support the Trinity? Or
yeah, I mean, I think it would be a good thing if there was a way that fit modern Western rationality that just explained it so nobody had any questions left. But just because Christianity gets attacked for that, now I don't expect that we're going to come up with that, but I don't see how that'd be a negative thing if that could be totally explained.
I wonder.
It's just so ironic. That just leads us right into my next question.
Yeah, that's very funny. That's
right into it.
Went perfectly, like it was designed for it.
So if there was then that data set, and it was God became provable via science, how would that impact your faith in God?
All it would do is support it, at least my take on it, just because it would be another way to confirm what I already believe that I know is true.
What if? But now here's the what if. What if a scientifically provable God contradicted some of the stuff that were your articles of faith?
Yeah. Well, I'd have to I guess there'd be a couple of things. One would be if it was, I mean, I'm not sure, we'd have to figure out what scientifically provable or whatever would mean in that case. But the thing is that science isn't the only, and this goes back to I think Alan's point as well. Science isn't the only authority in Christian belief. There are other authoritative sources. So it's not just like if science proved it, then everything else goes away. It's more like, okay, here's what we've got scientifically. Now let's go back to some of these other authorities and figure out what that means. So it would be a process of trying to figure it out. But I would hope that people would be honest, although it would be tough for some folks, for sure.
But in a sense, that's a fascinating answer, because in a sense, the articles of faith would still call. It's
still like you're putting together like a puzzle in a sense. No, that's what you're kind of saying. Like
Yeah.
The pieces.
And the other is I don't know if you've checked out this guy's crazy hard stuff to read, in my opinion, but W.V.O. Quine talks about epistemology as a web of belief. And what I like about that is we tend to think of it as foundational, kind of like you have one thing that's your foundation and you build on that. And if you can pull the foundation out, it all falls apart. But what he talks about is that knowledge is more like a web of belief. And that means that you have a hard core to what you believe, but then it all branches out like a web and connects to all sorts of other things. And so for me, the hard core of my belief is a combination of, I'll just use the theological term for the first, revelation, kind of the idea, not the idea that it's something that has been revealed over a long period of time, starting back with Abraham. It's been revealed over time and built and developed as a way of understanding the world. And so if some major part of that was dislodged by scientific proof, then that wouldn't cause the entire web to collapse. And it's not like a web, just like, it's more like a 3D web. It's like a funnel web. So if some part of it got knocked out, work would have to be done, but it wouldn't wipe out the whole 4,000 year thought experiment, to put it in a certain, of the faith, because it would damage a part of it. And then people would have to figure out, okay, how do we repair this? How do we make this continue to be a viable way of thinking and doing? And in a way, that's what science does with some things, because science has some core, very hardcore kind of beliefs, and then a bunch of other beliefs based on that. And I think, at least my understanding, science is in a place right now where that unified theory is something they don't have, but they're still looking for. But what if the unified theory unified things in a way that took it way off of where it was? Well, again, science wouldn't throw everything out.
You're turning a question back on itself, like you were some Jewish guy.
Well,
right?
I'm not going to stand by. I'm not one to stand by science at all. Not to say I'm anti-science, but like I have problems with assuming the neutrality in certain structures of information.
Well, yeah, I mean, the strange thing to me is why science showed up in Western culture, like the science we use, because it's built on previous thinking from other cultures outside of the West, but it really took off in a certain period of time within Western culture in a way that's been hugely beneficial. But to me, there's a whole set of things that had to happen for us to even get to the point that we would think about the world in a scientific sort of way. And to me, that shows that it is a cultural expression, but it's seeking knowledge that's well beyond the culture.
I agree with that.
It still grows out of a cultural point of view.
I agree.
The church used to be the home of science.
Yes.
The Catholic Church, in fact, was
Well, it's still there's a lot of funding in the Catholic Church towards science.
yeah.
I mean, theology was called the queen of the sciences up
Yes.
until not that long ago.
Yeah. And as you have discussed on these podcasts, Randy, it really wasn't until really the 1900s. Well, Darwin threw a wrench into, well, in this country.
Okay.
It suddenly made religion competitive where it didn't need to be competitive, simply because there was an alternative explanation from where we all came from.
Yeah.
And suddenly, whereas there had been conversation between church and science, suddenly they stopped taking each other's phone calls.
I don't know. This might be really like not cringy. I can't remember where I heard
Go
this.
for it.
But like I always kind of thought of it as like science is like a different kind of form of seance. It's a different kind of listening.
Calling forth the spirits. Yeah.
Kind of. You're listening. We have measurements of certain things, but when you get down to the very smallest units, like what are we defining exactly? Like,
well,
my quark is bigger than your quark.
We're talking about we're communicating with it's a communication of sorts, a back and forth, a verification with science, and with isn't that what you did? A verification process. I guess the thing that's kind of got me hold up, I think we have such radically different conceptions of faith, and I did not really foresee that coming into it. You talk about faith, you said as a faith, like it's held on to something and it's unified. Like it's not like person has a faith in something, like you said, like faith, like it wouldn't impact the faith.
Yeah, because I'm thinking again with that Quine idea, I'm thinking of Christianity as this, this funnel web. Australia, they had funnel web spiders that were super poisonous, so it works for me. But it's this funnel that's a web-like funnel with a hardcore center that gives it its shape. And to me, what Christianity is a faith, a way of believing, trusting, living that starts all the way back with Abraham and then has been worked on for thousands of years. And it's a way of approaching reality.
But then so if it's a way unto itself, why would it need validation from any outside source or community? Like wouldn't yeah, well,
Well, I mean, to me, it since it is the way we're talking about it, I mean, my view is that the God I believe in would exist whether I believe in that God or not. So there's a sense where it's separate from that. However, faith, again, to me is about a relationship. So it's a connection between this being and humans. And so the way humans do knowledge is, again, I think Quine's onto something. We build it over time. We figure out what we believe through experimentation, verification, and all of that. And I would say that Christianity has gone through all sorts of verification processes since it started, as well as, in a way that science does as well. So there's a similarity there.
I think the way I'm bumping into personally, maybe, is that in my eyes, faith, like, yes, you can have faith and it can come back, but it's always overcome. Like it's always, or it's not, right? So either you have faith in like the economy or something, or you have faith in, and that faith proves itself or it doesn't prove itself. Like there's a point where faith stops or doesn't. I think that's true for people. I mean, that's part of the job of a pastor, is you're helping somebody that is at some point in their faith, and they're going to
they need to know, how do I strengthen it? What do I do when I hit things that seem to go counter to that? How do I get stronger? What do I do when when I fail myself in what I've said I believe? It's like I don't do what I want to do. How do I deal with that? So that's where I like that name, pastor, because the idea is that you're like pastoring, you're helping people move along on their journey when they need help with that, because some things totally fit with faith and other things fly totally in the face of what you trusted, and those are critical points for people.
Well, that's all the thing is that sometimes, but the problem then is that there is no, as you said, verification overall, right? Because you have to have that faith throughout a lifetime. You can't give up the faith all of a sudden. It's not something that will come and go. It is maintained.
Well, I mean, that's the hope. There are definitely a lot of people that start out with faith, but there's a whole variety of reasons why they don't continue with it. But what you're trying to do as a pastor and as a believer, someone who has faith, your goal is to finish the race. There actually, Paul talks about it like a race, like you're running a race, and the goal is to finish and win the crown. So perseverance is a big part of faith, but you have to have a lot of verifications along the way, or else I don't think you can continue it. If everything flies in the face of what you trust, then
can I ask a question?
Yeah.
In that race, what's on the other side of the finish line?
Yeah.
Can I, before you answer, I kind of also want to piggyback off that, because that is my, I think, kind of issue here. Not issue, but just like, is isn't that the whole problem? Is that if there is no thing to verify, you have to, as the pastor, kind of give that kind of source of not verification, but just reassurance, because there's no signs. But then I'm saying, what if there is a sign and it's provable, and it's like, then there's not necessarily a need for faith, because it is verified.
That would be true.
Well, again, to me though, my definition of faith is not just believing something that can't be verified. My definition of faith is trusting. So to me, having proof or not, if I have proof, that just makes it even better. And if I don't, then that's what trust is about. So it's like, that's not a conflict for me, just in the way I think of it. Now, if you're doing the God of the gaps thing, which a lot of people do, which is kind of like only in those spaces where we don't understand what's going on scientifically, we're going to say there's God, then God gets smaller and smaller and smaller the more that we figure out what's going on from a scientific point of view. But that's something that's totally separate from my approach to faith.
And I would say you have a fairly unusual approach. If we look at the spectrum of organized religion in America, you don't represent a majority position. You represent a rather informed position. I wonder if Tristan's question were to be answered and we had absolute proof, what would the Catholic Church do? If some of the proof of God contradicted what the Catholic Church has been saying for the better part of 2,000 years, what would some of the major Protestant institutions
well,
do?
No, you don't even have like contradicted is one thing. I want to see what happens if it backed it up.
Yes, of course, yes, that might almost be worse, in fact.
That's what I'm saying. That would not be the nightmare, is that it's all true. Because then what do you do?
Why would you need the church then?
Because that's the thing, is like, you have faith in a certain thing, you have trust. Like, I have trust in a relationship, and that trust is either at a certain point reified or it's broken.
Would the scientific,
so if it's
when
it's reified
proof,
oh sorry.
No, I was gonna say, would the scientific proof destroy the mystery?
Yeah, as you said, Christianity has a lot of mystery, and that's the whole, as you said, the whole point, and I agree with that.
So let's say, well, I mean, I'm trying to think. I think we still haven't identified the difference in the way that we're thinking, because to me, if it was verified,
Yeah.
great. I don't know what would be lost if we could, quote unquote, prove Christianity. To me, that would be great. I wouldn't lose anything from that, I don't think. So that's why I feel like I'm not understanding what your definition is.
I guess at the nature of, at the heart of the question is a thought experiment.
Yeah.
And the thought experiment is, if you accept, all right, let's say that someone walked in the door tomorrow with a paper that said, here's absolute scientific proof that one, God exists, and two, everything that's in the Gospels is scientifically verifiable. It's right here. It was under a rock the whole time. I picked up the rock and there it is. What would that do to, because articles of faith demand that there is a gap between what we know and what the religious institution says is.
Again, I don't see that gap being required. That's the thing. I mean, to me, it'd just be like, yay.
Well, but that's
you said the
now.
gaps get smaller as the science community tries to
That's
fill.
for people that buy into the God of the Gaps approach to the faith. They feel like ever since the 1900s, science has kind of impinged more and more on the faith, and they're struggling to try to find places for God, and it's narrower and narrower. But see, to me, that's my take is that's not, you don't look for God in the gaps. That's not the point. The point is that God's active in the middle of all we're thinking and doing. And so I'm not worried that we're suddenly going to so understand everything that faith won't be needed. I can't even conceive of how science could possibly, I mean, unless the world is just a big machine and there is no real personality, no soul, no free will, that we're kidding ourselves.
We're a thought experiment.
I mean, maybe if that, if science proved that it was all just a big machine that was running and we just kid ourselves, then that would be threatening. But otherwise, I don't see how science could explain away what Christianity says, because they're not competing.
What I think I'm hearing is that faith all by itself is vitally important as a thing unto itself.
Yeah, because again, with my definition, what it goes back to is trust. It's trusting that a promise made to Abraham 4,000 years ago is still at work in human history and will one day result in a world where there is no injustice, where there is no sin, where there is, all of that will, because all of that was not the way that life was originally created. Life was originally created and it was very good. It was a good place. Then things unraveled. And so what Christianity is you're trusting that, maybe this would be a good way that it would be a problem, is you're trusting that story, that way of making sense of our place in this world says that one day we will find ourselves in a life experience where there is no more injustice, there is no more sin, there are, all of that is gone, and life will work like it's supposed to one day. So if somebody could prove that day will never come, that would probably be a good that would blow a pretty good hole in things. If you could prove that no, there will never be a time where we're not struggling with Ukraine-like situations. But my belief is, and Alan will know to be very happy about this, given how skeptical I am about politics. My belief is that we will get out of this at some point, but it's not going to be of our own doing. I don't really trust us to solve that problem, because I think we're a part of the problem. We're so embedded in the problem of the injustice of the world that we're not going to be the ones that can find an objective position to make the changes needed to make the world a utopia. I think that's pretty naive. I think probably historically and scientifically, I'd have to work on it, but I think it's a naive point of view that doesn't take into account how life has worked on this planet for a very long time. And so that's the getting back that this, I'm working on that question you asked. What I expect to happen when you finish the race, or when I finish the race, is that
I knew you'd get to it.
Yeah, that there will be an existence that I'll get to participate in which one of the great passages I love, where it says, "And there will be no more tears." I just see that's a very poetic and powerful way to speak of a world where those things that we struggle so much with are no longer there.
And a lovely way to have brought that around, Randy.
Yeah. But I just on a
No, go for it.
Okay, well, there's a lot. Oh God, there's so much in there. Your answer honestly blew my mind, because it's not even an iota close to what I thought he was gonna be.
Oh, geez, Randy, look what you've gone and done now.
I feel like there's so many things we could talk about, but I just want to I'll just kind of keep it to one.
One question, because we have to wrap this up, D.
Okay, well, this isn't okay. Well, this is my last question.
This went even faster than usual. Wow. Okay.
I would just say I question what a utopia of justice would be, considering justice's context. Like, I'm only commenting because this is a class I was in really recently, was talking about Plato and Socrates, and justice for justice sake is nothing. Like, there's no justice if there's no law for it to come and be like, oh yeah, that's unjust.
Right. Well, right. I mean, it again, I mean, justice is in a lot of ways is a cultural construct, the way we work with it, because when I say I want justice, I'm thinking of a very particular scenario, most likely a scenario that benefits me, or at the very least, that the thoughts that I have of what is just get supported by community action. And I think that's a problem, because then again, it's kind of like, how do you define justice? There's a McIntyre, I don't know if you guys, but he's got a book called Whose Justice and Which Rationality. It's a really good book from, I think it was 70s or 80s, but Alistair McIntyre, he's really, really interesting thinker. He works some with that Quine view of epistemology too, but that's, that's the thing. I don't, part of the book I'm writing is sharing experiences I've had in different countries, as I really tried to figure out, how can I work for good in this world of massive disparity and unfair situations. And so many, I tried multiple attempts, but none of them actually worked. And that didn't lead me to despair. It just led me to realize I am so much embedded in the injustice of the world, the disparity of the world, the unfairness of the world, that I can't wave my own little magic wand or something and make everything better. I tried multiple ways to do that, and none of them worked. And that's part of what I'm writing about in the book. But that's where, to me, that enhances the idea of faith for me, because it's like, all right, if I can't bring about the change, then is there a way that's outside of me that I can participate in that would actually bring that change? And to me, that's Christianity is a really robust, I think, very robust way to approach reality and create some good now, while also recognizing that I'm not going to be the source of the big changes that need to happen. Because that's the other thing, I'll just throw this out, but I feel like so many people who think they're doing good end up doing evil because they're sure that they can bring the change that's going to make the world a better place. And I think there's so many examples of people, they had good intentions, but the results did not work well.
But that's exactly what Vladimir Putin thinks he's doing right this second.
I am certain he's somehow in his brain,
inside his crazy head, he thinks, doing this for the greater good of somebody.
Maybe the Soviet,
I want to wrap this up in a question, a final question, but I kind of want to take some stuff, hopefully, from what you just said, because that was really great. So oh God, I hope I can.
No, go for it.
You said about there be no more tears. And as I said about it's just trying to frame this right. Damn, this is gonna be it's a lot. I feel like I'm juggling a lot. I have to do some heavy editing here.
No problem.
Okay, so you're talking. You said that it's not going to be human made, right? The change, the overall change that we're going to say or we're going to see, and that kind of makes me think of a sense of like that's not so much like wisdom. Wisdom will not necessarily culminate in anything. Then we're looking for some kind of a non-knowing again, This is just, you can correct me when if I'm wrong.
Sure.
A non-knowing, and no more tears in that case. I kind of want to can kind of refer to literally no, and I know you didn't mean this, but no more humans. And is that kind of what we're really getting at here? And this is the question then, is do you see kind of a relationship between the rhetoric around climate change and what we're kind of talking about right now, such as climate change is something that must be responded to, ignored, followed, or accepted, tasks us with recognizing our guilt and complicity, something which must be believed in before it's too late, something that is much larger than us, we are in its wake, something that must change our subjecthood, people of Christ, people of climate change. Just as I said, an orientation in the world similar to, that was my definition of faith. So I just wonder, is in that similar, is the answer to both of those questions then no more tears? That no more humans? Is that
not knowing? That's why I said with the no more tears that I see that as a poetic expression. I don't think that means that we don't have any tear ducts or something. I think but what it is trying, it's kind of like there's another passage that says, and there's no more sea, SEA. And you're like, what the heck is that? But then when you kind of realize that how dangerous the sea is, especially for people, it is for us too, but it was really seen as this dangerous, mysterious, dark, scary place. So that's actually, in saying there's no sea, you're saying there's no fear. So I would not say that that's a literal thing about the tears or that there are no more humans. I think humans are a key part of it, of what will be. But it's just that a lot of the stuff that we struggle with, the way that the world is fouled up, will not be a part of that experience. In terms of climate change, if you are fully biblical, and by that's another authority that's key for Christians, we're supposed to be stewards of this planet. We don't own it. We have a responsibility toward the planet. Let me just put it that way. That's very much supported by kind of, again, that whole funnel that's developed over thousands of years. We're supposed to be responsible for this planet. So that's the starting point, is we have to be responsible. I think the other thing is we also have to care for the poor. And the other is that we are amazingly adaptable as human beings. So I would want to hold that trinity of ideas together. But by saying that what we need to figure out is, okay, we're already going to go into climate change. I mean, we're not going to stop it. I don't think anybody's saying that it's going to stop. What we're trying to figure out how to do is, how do we adapt, take care of the poor, and be responsible for the planet, given that we're on this trajectory. And the thing that I'm concerned about is, I think the thing I'm concerned about on the stereotypical Christian side is people that are just ignoring the responsibility that they have for the planet. The thing I'm concerned about for some people on the other extreme, perhaps, is they're not really thinking about the poor. They're thinking about the climate science, and we've got to make a massive change, but they're not thinking about the fact that, how do we do this in a way that those that don't have the kind of power we have or the resources that we have will be able to make that shift as well. Because there are situations, anyway, and I can go more into that later, but so to me, I don't believe that, well, anyway, so for me, that's where I would stand, is we are responsible for the planet. We always have been. Yes, we've done a poor job of recognizing the impact that we're having, and we need to figure it out. But we also need to care for the poorest of the poor. And we also need, we're good at adapting. We've adapted to multiple changes in our environment, and we're going to be called upon to do it again, no matter how well we do at this point. So we need to use all three of those and respond. So,
I think that's the thing I was trying to connect, was like the aspect of calling upon in the ecological movement and in Christianity, that it shares that it's the same rhetoric.
Yeah, I think there's one of the things that, just from Christians I know, one of the things that makes some Christians hesitate to get involved in the ecological movement is that there is a worldview difference at times, where there's kind of a Gaia kind of thing that is, from a Christian point of view, is like some steps back into a polytheistic more approach on things that causes a lot of problems and is not the best way to deal with the issue. But that, again, I think, Christians should always be willing to work with other people around some affinity issue, no matter what, as long as the other side's willing to as well, and try to find a solution. But I do think that's one of the things that makes some people hesitate, is they feel like, well, there's such a strong, the language some of them would use is, there's such a strong New Age aspect to the environmental or climate movement that it makes them feel like, I'm not really welcome there with my ideas, so I can't be a part of that. So I hope we can bridge those gaps, because like you say, we actually have a lot in common. And there is a very strong Christian reason to be involved in figuring this thing out, rather than just trying to, act like it doesn't exist. So.
Does that answer your question, Tristan?
It's just started a bunch of new ones, but
well,
hey, seriously, let's do it again sometime, because
yes,
I would, I love this stuff, and it just helps. I love hearing what you're thinking about and how you're thinking, and then it helps me to continue to shape what I'm thinking and doing, for that matter. So, so I appreciate it. And
no, this was great. I appreciate you building my
totally. Seriously, I mean, I could do this all day. I could do a 4-hour podcast like this and be super happy. So,
I think what we're going to do, Tristan, is we're going to leave all those bombshells inside your head. Normally we end with a bombshell. We're going to break with tradition. We're going to leave all the bombshells inside Tristan's head.
Ah, great.
And seriously,
that bombshell.
That's
and on that bombshell.
Well done.
Thank you,
well
everybody.
Done.
Thank you, Tristan. Thank you, Randy. Hey,
thanks, everybody.
We're going to do this a lot more often.
Let's do it. Because I would love to. So, Tristan, you want to, there's other stuff that are burning questions that you want to talk about, let me know. We'll set up another time.
We'll set that up.
Totally happy to do it.
And until then, hey, thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks to everybody. Appreciate y'all being with us.
We'll see you next time.